Hi there. So this afternoon, we are talking to my amazing intern, Katherine Wang. This is part of April's Intern Awareness and Gratitude Month. At least that's what I'm calling it, because it is pretty much through the labor and all the innovation insights of our interns that Dance Data Project has been able to make so much progress. So Katherine, welcome to DDP Talks 2.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here.
So explain how you got to us, how you first contacted us, and what interested you about what Dance Data Project / DDP does.
Yeah, so DDP actually came across my Instagram feed a while back, I think a few years ago. And I was really surprised at the time that it didn't have more followers than it does. So definitely follow them if you haven't yet. But I got into direct contact with the company last summer. I was working on a research project at the time about racial fetishism and concert dance. And I was wondering if they had any data related to just racial, racial data in ballet specifically. And then I just kind of got roped in. So now I'm an intern.
That's great. So just for those of you who are watching and are interested, collection of data around race is a very fraught, very political issue, and Dance Data Project doesn't do that because for a number of reasons. Some communities feel that it could be very useful, and other communities are very much opposed to it for a number of reasons. Also, it's frankly not my expertise, not our area of expertise. Gender is a little bit clearer. We definitely put aside a category, and we are absolutely waiting for our first trans or non-gender conforming leader to rise to the surface, or choreographer, in which case we will absolutely honor that. So for example, I am incredibly impressed by Katie Piles, who goes by they, from Ballets with a Z on the end of it. But when Katherine and I got in touch, I explained that we didn't specifically do racial data. I think I think the Bureau of Labor Statistics and maybe AFTA does that work, maybe Dance New York, but we stick specifically to gender. So you've been working with us since September. Let's talk a little bit about where you are now, where you're at school. I'm just so impressed with your time management skills. I think I need to intern with you.
Yeah, so right now I'm a senior at Phillips Academy Andover. It's a boarding school in Andover, Massachusetts, but I'm originally from the DC area. So in terms of time management, I'm actually pretty fortunate that I was very big about it in middle school, and I kind of just continued sticking with that into high school. But beyond just planning out my day in terms of schoolwork and events and outside commitments, I think over the past few years, I've really come to realize that it's equally important to know how to take time off, whether that means, spending extra long at dinner with your friends or sitting out some days with the active intention to just do nothing and spend that time off. And, that sounds like an oxymoron, but I think it's actually better for productivity in the long run and to avoid burnout, especially in such a competitive environment. And generally, I think it just also helps you appreciate life beyond working and studying.
I think that's great. And clearly it works for you. So let's talk a little bit about that. Many of our watchers, listeners may not know about Phillips Andover and what it's like, what the environment is like. So talk a little bit about, it's an extraordinarily distinguished school with a long history, but it is pretty competitive. So talk a little bit about what that's been like.
Yeah, so it's definitely very competitive, very rigorous, very fast moving. I think I've always been pretty independent, which is what kind of drew me to Iowa boarding school and prep school in the first place. But I think one skill that it has really gifted me with is kind of to really take initiative for myself and seek out the opportunities. So, reaching out to DDP for one example, I think being at Andover really helped kind of almost work up that courage in me with opportunities like this.
Yep.
Choreographing is another example that I started doing at my time here. So I think it's definitely challenging it's, you could say it's contentious at a school like this. It's a prep school. It's very elite. It has a contentious history, but I think it has still taught me a lot, and I'm extremely, extremely grateful for that.
Talk about, do you have plans yet? Do you know where you're going, or have you narrowed it down at all?
Yeah, so I have not committed yet, have not made any final decisions, but I am right now looking towards Stanford, as probably my most likely possibility. But of course, I haven't decided yet, so it's all up in the
Well,
air for
it's
now.
an absolutely fantastic school. And you mentioned when we were talking before the interview that you are working with a professor at Stanford this summer. I
Mhm.
will point out you're also staying with DDP. Don't go
Yes.
anywhere. And work for us. But talk a little bit about the professor with whom you'll be working and the project that you are working on in general.
Yeah, so her name is Professor Jennifer DeVere Brody. She's super cool. She works, I believe she's the director of the Center for Comparative Studies in Race and Ethnicity, and she also does stuff in the Theater and Performance Studies department. I'm not sure about
Oh,
her official title. Yeah, so I will be researching and looking into racial theory, queer theory, and also kind of performance within sculpture. So that's what my summer is looking like.
that does sound really interesting. How did you, and maybe it's the same way as DDP and what Andrew was taught, did you reach out specifically to her?
Yeah, so I literally just cold emailed a bunch of professors. Worked on a project on dance studies last summer, and I think that really kind of empowered me to find other performance professors and just academics like that, to seek out more intellectual opportunities.
If I remember correctly, you have an interest in dance and in choreography, but your background is not specifically in ballet. Is that correct?
My background is actually in ballet.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah, I grew up doing definitely a lot of ballet. I think for like maybe 13 years now. I've lost track, but more recently I've been getting into more contemporary ballet and contemporary styles, which is a lot of fun. I'm a big fan of improvisation and improvisational techniques. Ballet, and last summer I spent a lot of time with Hubbard Street. I did some intensive at Lions Ballet, and also with the Kennedy Center with a program under Hope Boykin, who is fantastic person, by the way. And I think that just
We are big
even
fans of Hope.
yeah, she's fantastic, fantastic mentor. But I think like even going back to ballet classes now, I think that those experiences over the summer and really taking the time to dabble in different like pedagogies and like dance styles, even when I go back to ballet, it's really taught me to be more, to challenge myself more and to be more artistic, and instead of just kind of very much like conforming to the ballet mold, as some would say.
So let's talk a little. DDP is much more research oriented, and we don't do um, we don't make policy in around those, or we don't say
Hmm.
why we think things are. But I'd be interested about in your thoughts, because with your background in ballet, and yet you have a lot of confidence and you're reaching out, you have always been really independent. A lot of what I read and my own experience in hearing the stories is that ballet doesn't necessarily encourage women to
Hmm.
think for themselves, I talk to a lot of choreographers who don't know how to ask for, female choreographers,
Yeah.
who don't know how to ask for a raise. I run into male allies all the time who say, when I get an offer to teach at a school, for example,
Hmm.
I consider that an opening bid. Women just take it, right?
Hmm.
So talk a little bit about the culture of ballet and how you managed to work within it and also self-start and advocate for yourself.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting because I don't really fit into the image of a typical ballet dancer, which is kind of a curse as a child when you're trying to be, best one in the room. But now I think in retrospect, it's taught me a lot about the art form itself and has pushed me to think critically, as we are now. Like, so I think kind of not really conforming to the very Russian style, the very Balanchine style has taught me to kind of make my own place within the ballet world, and to go beyond that and think more broadly about dance. Like how can I make my place in concert dance broadly? How can I take parts of ballet, and acknowledge the very contentious history, the whiteness, the elitism, the body standards, etc. And I think, I coming to Andover, I think also helps with that, and that it's not a ballet school, it's not a dance school, it's not even an art school, like it's an academic boarding school. I've got to meet so many different people, so many different interests. So that's, I think, been monumental. And as part of that, I've had a lot of very fantastic mentors here, feminist mentors, and also just reading my own like feminist theory, like Black feminism theory. Just I think all of these intellectual and interpersonal experiences have really just pushed me to think critically about the world that I live in and my place in it.
That's one. Yourself, I mean, in college, how is this going to work? You got a lot going on and a lot of interest, which is spectacular. How are you going to integrate all of that together?
Yeah, so not sure yet, but I definitely do want to keep dancing and keep choreographing, whether it means choreographing for student groups, summer intensives. I think have always even I don't really dance much at school because I have a busy schedule. So I think summer intensives, like even during high school, have been kind of monumental for me as a dancer. So hopefully I'll be able to continue that in college. I'm hoping to major in symbolic systems or another form of data science, as well as sociology and with a
Oh,
minor in
wow.
dance in college. So I kind of want to just melding those together and finding new interdisciplinary pathways.
So talk to me a little bit more about that. That's if it seems, I mean, I know that there's a huge relationship, for example, between math and music. And I'm uncovering more and more just amazing young women who have a computer data hard math side and a dance side. So talk to me a little bit more about the data science and where you might be going with that.
Yeah, so I've been really inspired by Bill T. Jones, Arnie Zane did a kind of Google AI collab, and I think so did
Yep.
Wayne McGregor, I believe. I believe there's this woman at Google who dances who has also done something similar. I'm blanking on her name, but I think there was a feature on her in a dance magazine.
Yeah, that she was dancing with a robot, but she also,
Yeah.
I mean, it's so interesting, Katherine, that you bring that up because her first three pieces I saw, and I just reiterated that, so shame on me, said she's dancing with a robot. What they don't tell you is that she's programming it, that she's a scientist. I believe she's
Yeah.
an IT, I'm not sure.
That's interesting. Yeah. So definitely interested in kind of new ways to reshape our dance consumption, especially in this very modernizing world. And then also, I think recently I've become very interested in this subject of like data feminism. There's a book, I actually have it right here.
Hold it up for the camera.
Really good book. The
How
two
cool is
authors
that?
came to speak at my school like last week. But even before, attending their lecture and reading this book, I've been just interested in how we can kind of reshape and remake this field of comp sci that's very male dominated, very white dominated, and to
Yep.
use it for social good, especially when it's isn't ethical all the time when you're thinking about big tech and such.
That might be an understatement. Yep. Well, and also I've been seeing a lot, and maybe it's the same person, but I think Northwestern, the Dean of Communications has a speaker coming up who talks about how the algorithms are, reinforce and create racist, racist
Yeah.
biases
Yeah.
against women, et cetera. So I think that's laudable. Which brings us back around to DDP, right? And my idea, I would say somewhat naive theory of change, which is once we show the statistics around dance, people would rise up in arms and things would change.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Oh, I was gonna say, like, I think it's really important to hold our institutions accountable. Obviously, as you said, I've seen this in the work that DDP does. I've also seen this at my school, and how like the students hold the administration accountable. Yeah, I mean, I think that's incredibly important. One of the most, I think, surprising things that I learned here at my time at DDP was about ProPublica, I believe it's called, and how all the tax records of nonprofits are all publicly available. And so I think looking at the financial records and seeing the pay disparities between different gendered artistic directors and executive directors has been interesting. I think also it's just interesting to look at how much these kind of higher ups are paid in comparison to dancers who are paid very, very, very minimal amounts. And just how can we ensure that dancers are paid a living wage and above, are given assurance when the administratives are paid like $300,000 a year. So that's been surprising for me and really rewarding.
Yeah, is when I first came into this, a lot of things I didn't know, a lot of things I continue not to know. But what I hadn't realized is how much of dancers' income is based on when they're not with their company, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's teaching at summer intensives, it's other gigs. And that also looks to me like one of the pathways where men are quickly elevated and women sort of stay in the same place. So an artistic director, calls up another artistic director or the head of a festival, or even the head of another school and says, so-and-so, I would like you to hire so-and-so, or however it's done, to teach at your summer intensive. And I think it would be great to give him a choreographic opportunity. Or when I've been traveling around, I think I've visited 18 companies now. What's really funny, it was like, I know that face. What I would see is men from companies I knew being given jobs at other companies as rehearsal directors or whatever. So they're outside their own company, not just as a dancer or not just as a dance teacher, but they're being given a leadership and administrative role, which then adds to the resume, which of course, when they go to apply for a job, or they're recommended for a job. And women just don't get on that secret ballot, that list, that they're not being alley-ooped to that next level of job, which presents them an opportunity to organize bodies on stage or to do their own work, which I think is really interesting. So one of the things I'd love to look into further is how much of a dancer's income is derived from their company contract, and then how much of it is outside.
Certainly. I think that also, there's both kind of like internal company within like within the company itself and how they arrange their expenses and whatnot. And also I think it points to kind of how dancers aren't paid just within their company alone. You need to seek out outside opportunities. I think that points to kind of this how we socially, as a wider, broader society, this devaluation of the arts in general, and how most of the funding goes to like bigger corporations, and how the arts is, as we've been saying for a while now, extremely lacks funding and such. So yeah, I mean, just to go on to your thoughts about how women aren't kind of don't receive the same opportunities at all. I think even beside that, like we should definitely be ensuring that these dancers have the money like within their own company in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I don't know, I know there were at one point, I think two dance companies in the United States, Aspen Santa Fe, which has just gone away, and Hubbard Street, which had 50-week contracts or almost, and full benefits, et cetera. And I've heard of pickup companies, touring companies, the contracts are 6, 8, 10 weeks long. And then even some of the major ones, they certainly don't stretch to 50 weeks a year. So that means you're constantly on the hunt for jobs or employment.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned Hubbard Street, and I'm a big fan of Hubbard Street. I did their summer intensive, as I mentioned earlier. But they actually just changed or got a new artistic director who's a Black woman, and I admire her so much. And I think it'll be really interesting to see kind of how just leadership structures change kind of the benefits that employees and dancers receive. Yeah, I mean, expenses are sorry, not expenses, like wages and health insurance, especially as a dancer. It's just also important.
Given the socioeconomic system we've got, what is the best way to advocate for dancers? And as you know, we've talked about this a lot, dance is losing audiences. And I think part of it is because it's sort of irrelevant to, the most exciting work I see is not right in the classical form of ballet. It's, as you say, contemporary ballet.
Yeah. I mean, I've been like as a choreographer, and I think as a dancer, as a person, I've been really inspired by like Annabelle Lopez Ochoa in her work as a contemporary dancer. I'm thinking specifically of her piece on Frida Kahlo. So cool, I think, just in kind of also highlighting cultural histories as well. Um, who else? Crystal Pite. She has the Seasons canon, so good. The Statement, which kind of touches upon ethics within like a very corporate structure. So I think there's this new wave towards kind of almost like socio-political commentary, and just using dance as a way to channel other social threads that are very relevant to our kind of our
Yes.
climate, which is super.
Hey, there is really good, really cool new stuff out there, right?
Yeah, I think yeah, I mean, I definitely think that there's this kind of need to convince the public, speaking broadly about that, there's more than dance beyond just like this classical ballet that everyone tries when they're in kindergarten and then quits. Like for example, my
Right?
roommate who's over there, she's never, well, she did ballet as a child, but she's very like not, she writes, but her main thing is comp sci. But over the summer, I showed her a lot of Crystal Pite, a lot of Hubbard Street, a lot of Alonzo King, and now we always watch dance together. So I think that there's just this need to just present these very innovative works to the public, um, and let the public desires just continue to shape what we think of dance and performance.
So do you think choreographers are made or born?
Made,
Like generated
made.
from experience and from encouragement
Uh-huh.
and the contacts you make, or do you think it's more, I mean, I look at somebody like Twyla Tharp, she, it almost like she's her own weather
Mhm,
system. And she, I forget which company it was, she marched in, maybe it was Merce
mhm.
Cunningham, I'm trying to remember, sat down, said, I'm here, you are going to accept me. And she's
Yeah.
always gone her own way. And other choreographers I know, as they got immersed in ballet, as they worked with other people, slowly discovered
Mhm.
that it might be something they wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, Twyla Tharp's book, I think it's like Habits of Creativity, something along those lines. I don't know if you've read it. I read it in the winter, but she actually talks about kind of nurturing creativity and creation as a habit. Um, and like you mentioned Twyla Tharp as an example, but I think also it's like in that book, like she very advocates that anyone can be creative, whether that be in terms of dance, writing, visual art, etc. I definitely think that choreographers are made under like good mentorship, opportunities in kind of this a space to make mistakes and to challenge themselves and just have fun with it. Honestly, I think away from this kind of the gaze of the audience and to really see what makes them just feel proud of their own work.
It's interesting. Leah Serio, in our interview with her, her pickup project with her brother, Jeffrey, does exactly that. It's just a space for a group of
Hmm.
dancers, people who like each other and like being around each other, just
Yeah.
to create without the pressure to come up with a work right away.
Hmm. Yeah. That sounds fantastic. I wish I had more time for that at school.
Well, you've got a lot going on. Katherine, thank you so much for taking the time. I cannot wait to see what the future unfolds for you. You've been an extraordinary colleague to work with, and it's just been a ton of fun to get to know you, and hopefully you're not leaving anytime soon. Thanks for your time and your insights. Maybe we should come back and do this again in another 4 years, see where you're at,
That'd
right?
be awesome. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.